So former President Barack Obama has now broken his silence on Donald Trump and his fascist turn. And man, this is interesting for a number of reasons. So I got a few clips here for you. Let's dive into it. Let's start with the one that went the most viral. Here we go.
Imagine if I had done any of this. Let me just, I just want to be clear about this. Imagine that. Imagine if I had pulled Fox News' credentials from the White House press corps. You're laughing, but no, this is what's happening. Imagine if I'd said to law firms that were representing parties that were upset with policies my administration had initiated, that you will not be allowed into government buildings. We will punish you economically for dissenting from the Affordable Care Act or the Iran deal. We will ferret out students who protest against my policies.
I honestly think it's fair to say this. Obama would have been impeached immediately. If he did what Trump is doing, he would have been impeached immediately. Just the Fox News thing alone, if he said, Fox News, you're losing your credentials for the White House, get out, he would have been impeached immediately. Trump did this to the Associated Press because they're like, we're going to call the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of Mexico. We're not going to change it to the Gulf of America. He flipped out and said, you're done.
We will punish you economically for dissenting from the Affordable Care Act or the Iran deal. We will ferret out students who protest against my policies.
Yeah. All right, we got more from this speech. Here we go.
This has to do with something more precious, which is, who are we as a country and what values do we stand for? And now, this is not just an abstraction, and I think this is one of the challenges that we have. And I saw this even before the last election. I think people tend to think, democracy, rule of law, independent judiciary, freedom of the press, that's all abstract stuff because it's not affecting the price of eggs. Well, you know what? It's about to affect the price of eggs. One of the things that has distinguished us in the past has been this basic idea that we are a rules-based society. What that means is that, you know what, I can support one candidate instead of another, and I don't have to worry that the police are going to come harass me or my customers. That's what happens in other places. That's what happens in Russia. We take for granted the idea that we don't have to pay bribes or hire somebody's cousin in order to get a business permit.
The basic liberal values, what he's talking about, like having checks and balances, not having a gangster thug mafia government that would like intimidate you if you speak out against the president. This is a point I made recently is like people did start to take basic liberal values for granted, right? And this is what it looks like when you don't have it. That's when everybody goes, oh shit. So that like that was on the menu to like get rid of those things, to actually get rid of those things. For the president of the United States to say, I'm just going to completely and utterly disregard multiple courts that told me in no uncertain terms you can't do this thing. I'm just going to disregard it. When they said, hey, you kidnapped somebody illegally and without due process sent them to an El Salvador slave labor camp. And the judge said, I know that plane's in the air. Turn that bitch around because this is not legal. And they disregarded it and said, the plane was already over international water, so you have no authority. Tee-hee. That's when people look at that and they go, oh my God, I didn't even know that that was like possible, that that was something anybody would think of as president to just, I'm just going to flagrantly disregard the courts and take away the most basic constitutional rights. That's when people realize like, oh, we took basic liberal values for granted, right? Enlightenment values for granted. And he's definitely right about this part. You know, now that they're not only on the way out, they are gone. They're already gone. when you've already kidnapped over 200 people and illegally sent them to an El Salvador slave labor camp, when Trump came out the other day and said, even if they're American citizens, yeah, we're going to send them to El Salvador. That is wildly illegal, wildly unconstitutional, and he doesn't care. And he's got the sycophants and the gangsters in place to just carry out his orders. And yes, in that moment, people go, oh, well, those things, I like it the old way. I like it the old way. And we were never perfect on these things, but certainly domestically, we were way better than we are now, right? With American empire, it's almost always been the case since we became the world empire. Oh my God. If it's overseas, if it's foreign policy, they bomb whoever they want, they puppet governments, they violate international laws, and all that stuff is horrible and totally indefensible. Domestically, though, there was always more seriousness to the system, where you do, if any court said to any previous president, like, hey, you can't illegally ship people to an El Salvador slave labor camp, they'd be like, okay, right? With Trump, it's just like, wrong, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. He's not done yet, though.
That's how we built the economy we did. That's why this place worked. And it has very concrete impacts on all of our lives. So, this is the first time I've been speaking publicly for a while. I've been watching a little bit. Yeah. Let me just close this portion of my remarks by saying it is up to all of us to fix this. It's not going to be because somebody comes and saves you.
He's also sort of underestimating the depths of the depravity of the Trump administration, because as we discussed previously on this show, there's evidence that they, on April 20th, are going to invoke the Insurrection Act and declare martial law. And in that scenario, Trump would turn around and say, all protests are illegal, right? And the fact that he's gotten away with everything to this point means he feels emboldened. He got away with 91 crimes. Everybody knows that. Got away with January 6th and the fake elector slate. Everyone knows that. Got away with tanking the global economy on purpose, as he admits. And so when he declares martial law, what then? What then? Because yes, you need that bottom-up pressure. He's 100% right about that. But you also do sort of need leaders. You do need leaders who have positions of power and authority, who are willing to take risks and fight back. So he's not done, but I got to give you my overall takeaway from this is actually a little counterintuitive. Wait for it.
So, and I do think one of the reasons that our commitment to democratic ideals has eroded is that we got pretty comfortable and complacent. It has been easy during most of our lifetimes to say you are a progressive, or say you are for social justice, or say you're for free speech, and not have to pay a price for it. And now we're at one of those moments where, you know what, it's not enough just to say you're for something. You may actually have to do something and possibly sacrifice a little bit.
I mean, there's definitely a point here, because the same thing is true with trade wars and tariffs. Roughly every 100 years, we do this. You have some psychopath who goes in there and starts a trade war and tanks the economy. And then everybody who remembers that goes, oh, let's not do that again. But the last time we did it was what, right? And the people who do know, they don't have the firsthand experience of it. Same thing with massive wars, right? Massive wars break out every certain period of time because people don't remember how horrible it was, and then you'll do it again, and then the people who lived through that will go.
So, yeah, if you're a law firm being threatened, you might have to say, okay, we will lose some business because we're going to stand for a principle.
And so many of them didn't. So many of them caved. Trump basically extorted these law firms, said, I'm signing an executive order to target you, stripping away your ability to do any business with the government, et cetera, et cetera. And most of them were like, what do you want? What do you want? $40 million pro bono legal work? Fine. Got it. Thankfully, there was just a letter that came out. I think it was hundreds of law firms are standing up against it. But some of the biggest name law firms did the opposite. And we're like, we'll cave to Trump, whatever you want, dog.
If you are a university, you may have to say, figure out, are we in fact doing things right? Have we in fact violated our own values, our own code, violated the law in some fashion? If not, and you're just being intimidated, well, you should be able to say, well, that's why we got this big endowment. We'll stand up for what we believe in, and then we'll pay our researchers for a while out of that endowment, and we'll give up the extra wing or the fancy gymnasium that we can delay that for a couple of years because academic freedom might be a little more important. For most of human history, and to this day in most of places in the world, there is a cost to challenging the powers that be, particularly if they're abusing that power. And this idea, and I've noticed this among some wealthier folks who, after George Floyd, they were right there, and a bunch of companies were talking about how they cared about diversity and they wanted to do this, and they were all for that, and they are mute right now. But what that tells me is, all right, we say we're for equality. Are we willing to fight for it? Are we going to risk something for it? We say that we're for rule of law. Are we going to stick to that when it's tough, not when it's easy?
My overall takeaway from this is counterintuitive. And I want to remind you real quick what he said up front, because this is the part that I think Obama is missing, which is honestly devastating, because there is somebody who honestly I think could have made it so there was no Trump era, that the Trump era never happened. Ready? One more time. Listen to this.
Imagine if I had done any of this. Let me just, I just want to be clear about this.
Now, what Obama means by this is correct, as I pointed out. He means, imagine if I did Trump's fascism. Imagine if I ripped up the Constitution in as extreme a way as he's doing, deported people to El Salvador with no due process whatsoever. That's what he's saying, and he's right about that. But there's another interpretation of this, where he says, imagine if I did any of this. Well, if by any of this you mean, imagine if I didn't violate the laws, but imagine if I violated the norms and the civility. Imagine if I was different as a president and didn't just color within the lines. See, this is what I think he's missing, is that if Barack Obama made 3 changes to his presidency, I don't think we would have had a Trump era. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. Number one, when we had the subprime mortgage crisis and the Great Recession and the economy tanked, actually arrest the criminal banker frauds on Wall Street who orchestrated this to make short-term profit, destroy the global economy for short-term profit. They are criminals. They committed countless crimes. Arrest them, convict them, put their asses in jail, sending a message. We don't take, even from the top 1%, if you break the laws and you destroy the global economy, your ass is going down.